We're here with Professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, and he's one of the world's leading researchers in positive psychology. So, Mike, or Professor Csikszentmihalyi, in one sentence, what is positive psychology?
Well, it's a perspective on human nature that we developed based on many old theories of what human beings are. Professor Seligman from the University of Pennsylvania and I decided that psychology was looking only at things that go wrong in human life, and we thought that we needed to know more about the kind of things that go well. People who act with courage, with virtue, and people who are creative, people who enjoy their life, and that we could learn a lot about human behavior by looking at the good exemplars of good life. And so we decided to organize ourselves a little bit and get people interested in this perspective, and we ended up calling it positive psychology. It's not the best name, but it tells you that it's about looking at the things in life which are for which we can say it's worth living for, and that could be all kinds of different things. But we want to see how, instead of looking at how you can get people who are below average in health and well-being, how to bring them to 0 point. We are interested in how to go from 0 point above and to make life for everybody more interesting, more exciting, more meaningful.
So could I learn the same thing from a pop psychology self-help book?
Well, if it's well written, you could perhaps, but usually those self-help books, in order to attract readers, make it sound very simple and very just be happy and go and on. And that's not positive psychology. We start our course with reading about the concentration camps in World War II and who survived and why they survived and how they found meaning even in those conditions.
So you mentioned, World War II, and I know in your TED Talk you talk about growing up in Europe during the war and seeing other adults around you that weren't coping with the devastation very well. So as a child, what helped you survive in that moment?
Well, I was lucky in a sense that I had my parents and sister, so we weren't separated. We were able to help each other, and I felt protected by my parents at that age. But so I know how important good relationships are. I know how important good parenting is, and all that. So, but I was wondering about people who made it alone, adults who lost everything, and where did they find the strength and the hope to continue to endure? And that is part of what was in the back of my mind as I was growing up.
So you mentioned that you had a good family and the importance of social relationships. Aside from your family, did you have, or would you say that your family were your mentors, or did you have another mentor throughout your career?
Well, during the last part of the war, when I was 9 and 10 years old, that's when it really got bad. That was mostly the family. But I also had two older half-brothers who I really respected and who were really great role models for me. And their example was very important, even though one of them died at the end of the war, when the Soviet troops moved in, and the other was taken to the camps in Siberia. And I remembered how they lived to the end and how well they were able, how brave and cheerful and helpful they were. So at that time it was mostly family, I must say, and a few individuals whom I saw but didn't really know very well, but who impressed me by maintaining their integrity and so forth. Later on, there were many others, but that was, at the time, that's the family, yeah.
And in relation to your career, how important were those mentors for your professional development?
Well, there were some connections that, well, the family was important. Like my mother translated books, and she translated especially one that I really liked about evolution and so forth. And that was impressed me quite a bit, but really professionally there were other mentors or models later that I happened to read some books in psychology that were really interesting, intriguing, and I thought, hey, maybe if one studied this field, one could help some and make life a little better than what it was and so forth. So, yeah, there were so many authors that I read and individuals and so forth.
So, you're really well known for the theory of flow. What is a simple definition that everyone can understand of what flow is?
Well, flow describes moment in your life when you are so involved in something. Could be playing music, could be tennis, could be a good conversation, but you're so involved in what you're doing that you start forgetting everything else except the process of interacting with in the moment.
So is flow something that I have to go out and find the right thing where I can find flow, or is it something that I can do with what I already have, at the job that I currently have, with my hobbies that I already do?
Yeah, I mean, both ways can be done. Some people kind of like maybe their work, but not that much. But then they say, well, why don't I try to make it better? Why don't I try to improve on my performance of being faster, more precise, more elegant, more whatever? And once you take that attitude and say, how could I change my behavior so that I can do it really well, sooner or later you end up experiencing flow.
Do you think there's a criticism of people who think it might be manipulative, that positive psychology or trying to use flow in the workplace or in general might be manipulative? What do you say to that?
Oh, sure. Everything can be manipulative if you do it badly, from religion to science to anything. So if you try to be manipulative, I suppose you can. It's hard there because it really, unless you respect the person's own strengths and preferences, you're not going to go very far. If by manipulative we mean that you're trying to provide a situation where the person can truly feel good about himself, herself, work as well as possible, and go home energized instead of depleted. Well, if that's manipulation, I suppose it is manipulation too, but I think that's worth it. That's the kind of manipulation that you need more of.
Do you think there's a downside to flow?
Oh yeah, it can, like, unfortunately, everything has a downside if you do it without thinking or without, for instance, the thing was, when I started flow, I thought that it would be interesting to labor unions and people who work in big factories, and they asked me to go and give a few talks, and I realized very soon that the old union leaders They didn't like it at all. They said, oh, that's another tool of management. Don't worry about making feel good. Just give us the money and we'll use it. We don't want to feel good at work. We know our work is bad, but we'll do it. Just give us a fair wage and that's it. Of course, the younger union members were different. They said, well, we are going to fight for our salaries, but it's even better if we can work in a situation where we feel that we can do our best and feel comfortable doing it, etc. So that is one way to go wrong, is to try to use it instead of something else. And then the other one is you can get hooked on some limited activity that gives you flow and you forget about the rest of life, and then after a while you say, oh my God, what did I do? I mean, I spent all my life doing something small.
So going off of that, I know a lot of people experience flow while they're playing video games, or it's really popular when designing certain technologies. What do you think is the role of flow and technology in the future?
Yeah, technology can be a great source of flow. I mean, it's amazing. Not to me, I'm not a techie, but for instance, our younger son was floundering in school. He didn't like high school, etc., etc. And then he once happened to be in the school theater while they were putting up the lights and sound for the theater production. And he said, could I help? And so he helped. And, 8 years later, he got a job teaching at MIT in Massachusetts Institute of Technology, because he became so good at electronics, robotics. He built robots, he did all kinds of things. And he loved it, But he never watched TV, really, or played video games. Yeah. So I think the problem is, like with all of technology, is that no matter how good and thoughtful it is, it can be misused.
So gratitude is a big thing in positive psychology. What in your life are you most grateful for?
Change psychology for the better, so that is a good feeling. But I feel very good also about our family, the fact that we have 2 great boys and lots of great grandchildren. And
what advice would you give to someone who is about to graduate college and they're trying to figure out what next step to take?
Well, hopefully they have found it out a little earlier. But if by the time if by the time they are seniors, they still are wondering, then the best thing is to try a lot of things that may work out, but not commit yourself until you find that something is clicking, for you. And a lot of the people who are successful that I have talked to either knew it very early in life and they got more and more involved, age 7, 8, 9, and so forth. Or if not, if they ended up late adolescence without knowing, they traveled, they went to places that companies or stores or laboratories that were doing good stuff that he thought were important, interesting, and say, could I work for you cheap? I just want to, I like what you're doing, I want to do it for a while. You don't have to pay me much, I just want to. And then, after 3 months, 4 months, if it doesn't work, try something else. And in a year, you will have had 3 or 4 different experiences, and probably by then you would know, okay, this felt better than the other 3. and then you try to move in that direction. And that's why the way, as I say, these creative, successful people either find it very early or they go that way, you know, and it's one of the two.
So if you could change one thing in your life, what would it be?
I just out of curiosity, I may want to change, but otherwise not. Of course, most of the things I didn't do because I thought that would be good in the future. I did it because it seemed interesting, or I could do it well and it felt good. And so I wasn't disappointed because I didn't expect anything.
So there's an exercise that you do in one of your classes where you ask everyone to go around and say when they are at their best. So when are you at your best?
Probably when in terms of work type thing, I'm at my best when I'm trying to figure out what happens by looking at a bunch of numbers, patterns in numbers, or experiments, or research or something, and I try to make it put it together in a way that makes sense. And when I can do that, I feel that, wow, this is great, and I know that I tend to be good at it. I mean, from what experience, I think that is good.
So I have a couple of questions for you from the audience, from people who want to know, and I picked the 3 best ones. So first one is, do you believe in free will?
Well, yeah, it depends what you mean by free will, but now there is a renaissance in psychology about free will that, in a sense, it is a possibility, and I do think that you can really be almost free, and you can be completely unfree. You know, so the space of unfree is much bigger, because we are so conditioned from our genes, from our early experience, from to do certain things, to respond certain ways. But on the other hand, I do think that you can stop yourself and say, wait a minute, is this really what I want to do? And then look at options and choose an option that, at that point at least, seems more reasonable. And that, to me, is free will.
So the second question is, why do you think humans exist?
Well, that's a subset of a bigger question, namely, why are there galaxies? Why do we have stars? And I have no idea.
And the last one is, in your wildest dreams, how do you envision positive psychology influencing people in the future?
Well, I hope that positive psychology will keep changing and being more and more user-friendly.
Me too. All right, well, thank you. That's a wrap. Okay.